welcome to my booktube channel, The Loc'D Booktician, and today we have another episode of Welcome back. This is Nawlins Reads, where we sit and we discuss and we talk about a book that is set in either New Orleans or Louisiana. And today's book of discussion is The Beautiful by Renee Ahdieh. Before we get started, I want to talk about how I've already recorded this video. It was in depth. It was just a lot. It was actually a video that I filmed and I felt really confident about, only to find out that I deleted the clip on my phone before I was able to upload it to YouTube. So here we are trying to remake a masterpiece, but that's where we're at. The Beautiful by Renee Ahdieh follows the story of a young woman who is 17 years old. Her name is Celine, and Celine get into some trouble in Paris, and that's where she's living and that's where she's from. That trouble led her to the United States, led her to Louisiana, led her to New Orleans. There in New Orleans, she is trying to pass as a nun for the church or some type of person who is affiliated with the church. While she is trying to keep up this disguise, a woman asks her to make her a dress because in Paris she was a dressmaker. While Celine is in New Orleans, she runs into this guy named Sebastian. In the book, he's called Bastien for short, but his name is Sebastian Saint-Germain. Sebastian Saint-Germain. Whatever. My French is not as good as it used to be. Un peu. So when I looked on Goodreads, it told me that the genre for this book is fantasy, young adult, historical fiction, romance, mystery, and some paranormal. So that is all the genres of this book. I think what drew me to the book was the historical fiction aspect. This story was set in 1872, and it's a very peculiar time to be in New Orleans. And before we get started, I want to give you guys some history about New Orleans, kind of within 100 years of that time. One of the reasons this story drew me in is because the story initially, like when it opens up, is set in Paris. And I studied abroad in Paris. While in Paris, I was fortunate to learn about the history of the Louisiana Purchase, also Louisiana and New Orleans as a whole, and its relationship to France. So if you haven't heard about the Louisiana Purchase, the Louisiana Purchase is basically the amount of territory that the French took in 1803. Before I continue to talk about the Louisiana Purchase and what happened there, I want to acknowledge the land that was stolen. And a lot of times I don't like to use the blanket term of Native American because there are so many diverse nations, and I think it's important that we say their nation's name. I wrote down the list of tribes and also nations that were mainly affected by the Louisiana Purchase: Cherokee, Chickasaw, Choctaw, Muskogee Creeks, the Seminoles, Natchez, Yuchi, Alabama, Coasati, and Caddo people. So when we're thinking about the Louisiana Purchase and we're thinking about what the French did, then the Spanish and the French again did to that massive area of land, we also must acknowledge that it was stolen, treaties were broken, and here we are, still on stolen land. I won't give you specific dates because I want to keep this part as brief as I can and want to focus more on the actual book, The Beautiful. So just give you a quick timeline. Let's just pretend this is the timeline. At the beginning of the timeline, the French came in, tried to take over things. Okay, then the Spanish and the French had a war, and then it was under Spanish control. Then Spain and French did a little backdoor thing against the United States, and made a treaty, and Spain was like, okay, French, that's you now. So then the French owned control of Louisiana, of the Louisiana Purchase, I say, that area, for a couple years before the French sold it to the United States of America. Now let's talk briefly about Louis XIV. So when I lived in France, I learned a lot about Louis XIV. So Louis XIV was brought into power at a very young age. His advisor, or one of the people that was near him that had more political influence, actually led France for a while until he was of age to do it himself. When Louis XIV was a little boy, his parents died, leaving him without parents to help guide him. It's been said that Louis XIV didn't really like or care for the bourgeois. And the bourgeois was a group of people who were kind of like high middle class people, their nose up in the air, and they're very fancy and wealthy in a lot of ways. Louis XIV built the Palace of Versailles. He built it to show how much wealth he has and how far he has come. It has also been said that Louis XIV built the Palace of Versailles to invite the bourgeois to his home and to be like, hey, look what I have, look how rich I am, come and gamble and spend this beautiful time here in my palace. But some scholars believe that Louis XIV did this on purpose so that he can bankrupt the bourgeois and to do a huge payback to them for not protecting him and being there for him in the ways that he wanted them to be there for him when his parents died. Louis XIV was obsessed with things being beautiful. While being obsessed with beauty, Louis XIV sent prostitutes who were in prison or prostitutes who were on the street. And at this time in the literature it says prostitutes, not sex workers. Louis XIV was also taking over different countries and territories in the continent of Africa and sending those slaves to Louisiana. Also, if I haven't mentioned already, Louisiana was named after Louis XIV. Louis XIV wanted Paris to be as beautiful as possible, so in order to do that, he had to send the people that he deemed were less than to Louisiana. In Louisiana, you have the prostitutes he sent, you have African slaves, and other like French people who he was like, you're not it. You're not it. You're going to Louisiana. I need Paris and France to be beautiful, and you're not fitting in that scheme of things, so I gotta ship you off. Around that same time, France was also in a war or revolution with Haiti. And also at that time, Louis XIV was sending Haitians, African Haitians, to Louisiana as well. So when you think about Creole people, you're thinking about this mixture of Spanish people and French people and African people and Haitian people and Native people. That is a combination of Creole people in Louisiana. Now I know the history lesson I just gave you was not, 40 pages or 40 minutes of information. I just wanted to keep it brief. But I say all that to say that a lot of times when I read novels that are set in the 1800s or the 1700s, and the novels are written in like this time, especially when the novel is written by a author who is alive and well and probably younger than me or older than me, kicking and chilling in the 21st century. For me, it's hard for me to read a book and see no brown people or not really a mention of indigenous people at all, when the setting of this book is in 1872, and at this time there should be a plethora of Native people, Black people, African people, Haitians, Spaniards. They should be there. So when those people aren't really mentioned and it's heavily on the French side, I just be like, I guess I get a bit confused, because even when you think about the Louisiana Purchase, when the Louisiana Purchase happened, right? There only a small part of the Louisiana Purchase was actually inhibited by the French until treaties happened and it got larger and it got larger, and then they end up selling the whole Louisiana Purchase to the United States. So when I think about it, I think, okay, well, the Louisiana Purchase covered many states, like from Montana, I believe, and to Mississippi, Texas, all the states from that area on down. And I think about the French only being on like a tiny part of it. I get confused on why when we are discussing books in the 17th or 18th century, why is it heavily focused on white French people? Let's get into my review on The Beautiful. Apart from everything that I just stated, I actually really liked this book. I thought the writing was clear. I was able to understand it. I really loved the bits and pieces of French that was being put out throughout the book. Every time I see another language like French or Spanish being written in a book that has mostly English text, I always wonder if people who don't even know basic level French, would they be able to understand this? And I also get worried because a lot of times when readers, not all readers, but there are readers who read things, and if it's not directly for them and for their consumption, they just bash the book. The book is trash and it's garbage and that's it. When I first started reading The Beautiful, there was a line that caught my attention, and that line was, "New Orleans is a city ruled by the dead." So that kind of made me roll my eyes, if I'm being honest, because a lot of times when I'm reading books or even seeing movies and that's set in New Orleans, a lot of times people want to associate it with death, associate it with voodoo or something creepy or something that's not normal, and I just don't really understand where that comes from. I don't get it. Trying to figure out like where could they get that from, and I have nothing. It's just a blank. It's blank. I wonder if we can switch the narrative and make like Oklahoma creepy, or holla at Alabama. It's like, why is it always something mysterious? I don't see it being tied to the history, because the French history in the United States was pretty brutal. So I wouldn't want to glamorize that. So I just don't understand. There was another quote that really got to me in the book, and it was, "The faithless are alone in death." It really brought me back to Catholicism, because New Orleans, there's a lot of Catholics there. There's a lot of Christians there. Christianity is big, it's own, it's poppin'. So for a lot of people in New Orleans, whether you are white or black or even native or Spanish, everyone there, not everyone, most people in that city are very religious, very religious. And if you die and you're not believing in God, you will be judged. And I'm just being honest about that. Another quote was, "New Orleans is not what it seems at first glance." I say this all the time, maybe not in those specific words, but for example, when people find out I'm from New Orleans, the first thing they say is, "Oh my God, I went there. I had such a great time. I was on Bourbon Street. I was on Canal Street. I had a hurricane. I had daiquiris. Me and my friends had a great time." Or, "I got robbed there, but I still had a great time." So I'm not saying that New Orleans is not a great time. My childhood running around doing hood rat stuff with my friends, great. But, however, in addition to our rich culture, our rich customs, the ways in which we celebrate death, the ways in which we celebrate each other, I love my culture so much. It's just so good that it just envelops you and it just makes you happy and makes you excited. And I just love being from New Orleans. However, New Orleans can also be a very dangerous place if you are not careful. Also, when tourists go to New Orleans, I think they forget that people live there and it's not a party all the time. People come to New Orleans and they view it as their vacation, which in many ways it can be. But also remember that people live there. So clean up after yourself. Don't be throwing up all over the place. Like, there are children everywhere. Like, when there are children everywhere. There's people living there. There's people who have generation upon generations who have lived in New Orleans, and they're all through that place. So when you come in and you get so inebriated or have such a good time, sometimes that affects the people who live there. I've seen people accidentally hit my niece because they're so drunk walking on the street. I've seen people scream out and say crazy stuff. I saw people just flat out grab people, assault, and be like, oh, I love New Orleans, I'm having a great time. If somebody came to your city and did those things, how would you feel? And it's also things that people don't think about. For example, for Mardi Gras, growing up, I was told that you have to ask permission before you take pictures with an Indian for Mardi Gras. I was told that you have to show respect to them. You need to give them space. Because I've been to several Mardi Gras where I've seen people just take pictures and like walk right up to people, and I'd be like, I remember being a little girl and my sister almost beat up this white guy because he stepped on my foot and he was so drunk and he like dug it in. And I remember his foot just being so big, and I had to be like 7 and I was just crying so hard. And this man drunk, a tourist, living his best life, don't realize that me, 7 years old, I'm a kid, I'm from New Orleans, and I want to enjoy Mardi Gras just like him, maybe not to that level. He didn't even apologize. My sister almost beat this man up. It was because of that event that my sister was like, she's not taking me to Mardi Gras anymore in that specific area. And this is me recalling the memory as my sister told it to me. I remember a couple months ago, I was like, yeah, I remember someone stepping on my toe. And then she told me like that was a real memory and told me what happened. There were 3 things that I found most interesting about Celine's character. Number 1, the author doesn't really give us where her mother is from, specifically what Asian country. You don't really get no information. It's a lot of vagueness, and that right there didn't sit right in my heart because she kept referring to her mother, wanting to know more about her mother, and her remembering vaguely where she was born, which is where her mother is born. But she didn't have lots of memories tied to that identity, but you can tell throughout reading the book that was important to her. That part of the book was frustrating because as a reader, I'm like, yeah, where's the information? It just never came. I'm wondering if it was some type of thing thrown in by the author where we will know in The Dam. Maybe The Dam will give us more information, but in The Beautiful, I did not get that. Another thing that really disturbed me was how her father would react or say things to her when she would ask like, who was my mom? Where was she from? And he would kind of bury it and kind of disown it and tell her to pretty much focus on the white side. He didn't specifically say that, but if you read between the lines, that's pretty much what he was saying. The last thing that really frustrated me with her was her relationship with Sebastian. I felt that she was trying to play mind games with him, but she met her match and it was like tit for tat with both of them. But at sometimes it was frustrating because I was like, Celine, girl, you know that there's some creatures out here, and I know you feel it. I know you feel it. And you just gonna keep testing fate and trying to be big brave when something is literally after you. It's kind of like when you watch a movie and you're like, girl, he's coming, and it's still like the mug exploring, trying to check it out, looking underneath stuff, and you're like, why? The bad guy is coming for you. Chill out. That's how I felt about Celine. I do hope that in the next book we get more scenes with Nicodemus, who is Sebastian's uncle, because I think there is more to his background than the first book let on. I feel that he was not messing around and he wanted to protect his bloodline. Did he do it? No. I think it's because he's not known to be like a good guy. And because he wasn't a good guy, some unfortunate things happened. But I also thought Celine was a real G, because she was like, look, you're not going to bribe me to do what you want me to do. I'm going to live my life anyway. But that also caused her to put her life in danger. So, where is the line? I am also hoping in the next book that the love between Sebastian and Celine continues. I hope that it's a slow burn. And I know some people be like, oh, I don't like a slow burn. But I want it to be nice and slow, because this book is not a fast-paced book, in my opinion. It's a slow book. It's a slow-paced book. And to me, that is like perfect for this book. If it was fast, I'd have been like, oh, they trying too much. But it's like, you know, that snail. I'm here for it. I'll say it. My biggest hiccup with young adult novels is the immaturity of the character, especially the protagonist. A lot of times I want the protagonist to be more mature and make more mature decisions. However, that was not Celine. She was not giving that to us. It was because of that made the book a little like annoying for me. So I'm hoping in the Dam we either leave off from the last scene and there is some real character development that leads to some growth, or it fast forward to 5 years from now and then go back to when she was 17. You know, that back and forth motion. I can get behind that. But like I say, the immaturity level of the protagonist typically in young adult fiction is just a lot for me. I think if you're into romance, you into a monster, maybe sort of kind of vampire, werewolf vibe, a book with several mysteries. There are so many different mysteries in this book that you're like, wow, this author can do a lot with this. Also, if you're into some historical fiction type of vibe, I think this is the book for you. I think absolutely this is the book for you. I really like this book. I can't wait to read The Dam. I don't know when I'm going to read it, but I will be reading it. It is on my TBR. I'm so happy that I picked this book up. I don't even know how it happened. I was scrolling on Libby and I was like, oh, this might be good. It also helps me because I am trying to read more fantasy and more different types of fantasy. So maybe I can get back into that genre. Similar to when I was younger. Right now, I'm not really into it. And I would have to say more young adult fantasy is a little too much for me. The coming of age kind of fantasy is a little too much for me. But there are some exceptions. There's always exceptions to the rule. Thank you so much for subscribing to my channel, for going on this journey of Nawlins Reads the second time. Don't forget to hit the like button, the comment button, and subscribe if you haven't already. And let me know what was the most interesting part of this video for you. See you later. Bye.